What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Gould's Gaming and Tech channel. We are here with the new Star Wars game. This is Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, as always, you guys know I always hit you guys with the best visual and gameplay settings for these games that most of you play, and mostly I'm interested in as well. So this is no different. But before we get into that, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's definitely appreciated. And if you're new or returning, make sure to hit that like button. It's definitely appreciated as well. So without any further ado, we're going to dive right into the best settings for your gameplay and visual. So this is the start menu right here. If you go down to options, you will have your settings menu right here, and this is where you want to start. So once you click on gameplay, you will have this list of options right here. Now this as far as the gameplay settings, the best settings, this is just to make the game more immersive and just a smoother transition where you're kind of going throughout the game, just for your gameplay pleasure. So first thing I would like you guys to do is to toggle on dialogue line skipping. Now this is solely, and when I say solely, this is solely for the purpose if you die on a certain level or a certain map or a certain mission and you have to restart, but for some reason it restarts you prior to that cutscene or prior to that dialogue option. This will allow you to skip that dialogue so you don't have to replay it over and over again, because sometimes there are those games where you die and then you come back to life and it forces you to rehear that dialogue that in other situations you might want to skip. So this is only for that purpose right here. Now it says in conversation, by pressing X it'll skip ahead to the next line of dialogue, and it does not affect cinematics. This can be toggled on or off at any time. So I just turn it on ahead of time so I can skip those options just in case. Outside of those super cinematic scenes, the regular ones when you're just talking to people, it'll allow you to skip those options. Or also kind of if you are in a mission or speaking to someone and it isn't as prevalent to the story, or something that you don't really care, because sometimes in games they have dialogue that is pretty much meaningless, this will allow you to skip that. So I would say first thing to do is turn that on. Now next thing is auto switch target on enemy death. So this naturally comes on visible enemies only. I will put this on always because it says it enables you to automatically target a new available enemy if the currently targeted enemy dies. So this is good for when you're in combat and you're facing multiple enemies. Yes, you're going to be targeted on that first one, but as soon as that first one dies, you want to stay in the fight and not be surprised by any new enemies. Definitely if you play this game on hard mode, because if you play it on hard and you got multiple enemies coming at you, when that one enemy that you're currently facing dies, you will want to quickly snap to that second one. So I would put this on always, just so you can kind of stay in the fight and kind of always know your surroundings. Now, auto lock target in combat, I would recommend putting this off, because in that same kind of setting, when you're fighting multiple targets and two of them attack you at once, you don't want to, or they attack you simultaneously, or not simultaneously, but they attack you one at a time, but one quickly comes after the other. I would say turn auto lock target in combat off, because if you're attacking one enemy and you're locked on that person, but then someone else is about to attack you from behind, you can kind of maneuver so you can fight both of them at the same time instead of being stuck on that one. I've noticed in certain games when you auto lock on a target, you will be fighting that one and then somebody's approaching you from behind or the side. You see it coming and you want to fight them, but since you have auto lock on that particular target on, it kind of handicaps you when it comes to fighting those other targets. So I would say turn this off. As you can see, it says toggle to automatically lock onto a target during combat. So again, I would say turn that off. So as you scroll down here, I will leave all this stuff the same. Disable fall damage. So this is one that's important as well. So if you read the description here, it says disable fall damage if the player responds due to falling. This does not prevent the player from responding due to falling, but will ensure they don't respond with lowered health. So this is particularly important for when you're exploring and you maybe fall off a cliff or whatever the case is, something accidental. You didn't intend for it to happen. If you fall and it causes you to respawn, you don't automatically start back up with your heart pulsing and the screen is red and your health is low. It kind of just resets you back to where you were. Definitely if you're spawning in an area with enemies, you don't want to come into that fight with lowered damage or lowered health. So you want to turn this on to disable that fall damage for that particular reason, just to kind of give you an edge when it comes to exploration and in combat in those close encounters. Next thing on the list, and this would be the last one for the gameplay, is the slow mode. So only thing I changed is the auto activated slow mode in combat, because this says toggles automatic activation of slow motion mode when Cal enters combat, not during combat, but when they enter combat. So sometimes enemies may sneak up on you, and even if they don't sneak up on you, even if you can see it coming, you would, benefit from having slow mode starting when you enter combat, just so you can kind of assess things. All right, you drop down in an area, you see you can have like 5 enemies in front of you. It kind of lets you better assess how you want to engage in that battle instead of being caught off guard. So I would say turn auto activated slow mo on in combat. So next thing and last that you guys are probably really here for is the visual options right here. So performance mode, it says it limits the resolution to 1440p for increased frame rate. So I've noticed, at least with the last game, this game can be kind of choppy sometimes, and 1440p isn't bad. Definitely if you have a higher resolution, whether it be PC, Xbox, whatever the case is, even your PlayStation, 1440p isn't the worst. And if you're getting those 60 frames per second, that is definitely smooth. And plus, this game has just came out, so you don't know how well those 30 frames hold up, if it's a consistent 30 frames or if it drops off during certain cutscenes. So I would say turn performance mode on. It does still look beautiful, so I would just leave it on performance mode. Field of view, I will leave that as default, and this one is particular to you. If you find yourself in combat or just playing the game and default isn't good enough because you want to see more or see less, feel free to change that option. You can go to wider, widest, and then you can go narrow, narrowest. So I would just leave that as default when you first start the game, and that is the only reason I don't give you guys a specific one for that is because that's up to your individual viewing pleasure. And then HDR output, leave that on. HDR brightness, now you can adjust this. So what I went ahead and did is the default setting, it comes on, it looks fine, but again, it could be a little grayed out, a little washed out. So HDR brightness, it says it affects the brightness of the entire screen. Set this to your personal preference while making sure you can still see detail and brights of the image above. This does not affect your UI brightness. So the main thing I went off of is the clouds for this setting. The clouds on the left side of the screen, I wanted to still see detail in it, but again, I wanted my picture to be lit up to the point where I can see a decent amount of detail, but it's not washed out by too much brightness, if that makes any sense. So I found out what works well is the sweet spot is about 55. You don't want this too bright because then it'll just kind of hurt your eyes a little bit when you're playing, but you don't want this too low because it will not allow the other elements in the frame be emphasized, if that makes any sense. So 55 is a good sweet spot. And then HDR black point. Now this says it affects the darkest parts of the screen. Set this as low as you can while still being able to see details in the shadows on the images above. Now it says as low as you can. I know it starts off on 50, but I found just from my viewing pleasure, 25 is a good sweet spot. So it makes the colors pop a little bit more. And again, this is it's talking about the darkest points of the screen. So not the overall picture, but the darkest point. So all of your shadows or your deep crevices, your caves, things like that, where there's like a dark hole or pitch black hole somewhere. You want to make it a little bit darker so it'll make what's actually lit up in the shot stand out a little bit more. So 25 is a good sweet spot for this. After adjusting it going up and down, I found out that 25 was the best setting for this HDR black point. Now, that is my settings, you guys. If you go down right here, I will leave motion blur on, film grain on. Motion blur in particular, I leave it on because Cal Kestis does a lot of quick action maneuvers when he's in combat, and having motion blur off will kind of deteriorate the actual cinematic of that move. So I leave motion blur on because it's going to be going super quick anyway, and you're going to miss those details even if you had this off. So put motion blur on. It just help your eyes, handle what's processing on the screen a little bit better. But everything else, film grain, camera shake, all that stuff, I left that as default. And then HUD, this is the only thing that's, again, your personal preference. Just for your immersion purposes only, this is completely up to you if you want to hide the HUD or not. Just allows you to see more or less depending on what makes the most sense for you. But I don't want to make this video too long, you guys. That is the main visual and gameplay settings I would recommend for Jedi Survivor. Let's see if this is going to make your gameplay better than what you kind of originally went into it. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Maybe you guys have suggestions on maybe what works a little bit better for you. Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll definitely check those out. But these are the top settings that I recommend. Thank you guys for tuning in as always, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.